The group home smelled like industrial cleaner and burnt toast, and Wren Calloway had been awake since 5 in the morning staring at the ceiling. She counted the tiles the way she always did when she could not sleep. 14 across, 9 down, 126 squares of stained foam standing between her and a world that had never wanted her. She knew every water stain by heart. The yellow one shaped like a horse, the brown smear near the door that looked like a man bending over, the crack that ran through the corner tile thin as a hair that she had watched grow longer over 2 years of sleepless nights. This was the last morning she would ever see them. At 7 o'clock, a knock came at her door. A woman named Karen on the other side, her voice tired and routine, the way it always sounded when she had to deliver bad news to children who had heard worse. "Today's the day, Wren. You've got until noon." Wren did not answer. She was already packed. Everything she owned in this world fit inside a black plastic garbage bag and a backpack with a broken zipper. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a toothbrush, a library card from the Charlotte public system, and one small thing she kept separate from all the rest. A cracked piece of jade on a thin silver chain, the pendant her mother had worn the day she died. Wren held it in her palm for a long time before she clasped it around her neck. She did not remember her mother's face, only the weight of this stone, the faint scratch of the silver against her collarbone. The story Mrs. Reeves, an old foster mother who had since passed, had whispered to her when she was 10 years old, pressing the chain into her small hand. "This belonged to your mama, child. She'd want you to have it." Wren stood up from the narrow bed. She did not look back at the room. She walked downstairs with her garbage bag dragging across the linoleum, and she signed her name on a yellow form at the front desk. And she pocketed $41 in tips she had saved from peeling potatoes in the group home kitchen at $2 an hour under the table. Karen slid a manila folder across the desk. "Birth certificate, medical records, hotline numbers. You should call the housing line, Wren. They can sometimes place people in transitional shelters." Wren tucked the folder into her bag. "Thank you. Do you have somewhere to go? I'll figure it out." Karen looked at her for a long second. She had seen this scene play out dozens of times. The kids who walked out the door with a brave face and a garbage bag and no idea what came next. Some found their way. Most did not. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a granola bar. "Take this," and ran. "Be careful out there." Wren stepped into a March morning that could not decide if it was winter or spring. The air bit at her cheeks. The sun rose pale over the rooftops. She stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, with her garbage bag in one hand, and the world stretched out cold and indifferent in front of her. And she felt for the first time the full weight of being nowhere. No apartment, no job, no family. No plan beyond making it through this single day without spending more than she had to. She walked 6 blocks east toward the only place in Charlotte that had ever felt like shelter. The public library opened at 9, and Wren had been waiting on the front steps since 8:40. She had spent more hours inside that building than anywhere else in the city. The stacks were warm. The chairs were soft. And nobody ever asked you to leave as long as you were reading. The librarian at the front desk, a woman named Ms. Hollister, looked up when Wren came through the door with her garbage bag. Ms. Hollister was a slender woman in her 60s, gray hair pulled into a low knot, half-moon glasses perched on the end of her nose. She had been working that branch for 27 years. She had watched Wren grow up across half of them. Her eyes moved from Wren's face to the garbage bag. She understood immediately. Today. Wren nodded. Miss Hollister came around the desk slowly. She did not speak for a moment. Then she lifted a single white envelope from a stack of papers and held it out. This came yesterday. Addressed to you, care of the library. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but the return address is a law firm. Wren took the envelope. Her hands were colder than she realized. She turned it over. The return address read, Whitmore and Associates Attorneys at Law, Milbrook, North Carolina. She did not know anyone in Milbrook. She had never been there. She had never heard of it. She slid her thumb under the seal and the paper opened with a quiet tear. Inside was a single typed page, and taped to a small piece of cardboard a brass key. The key was old, tarnished, simple cut, the kind of key that opened something solid, something that had been waiting a long time. Wren held it in her palm and felt its weight, and somewhere in her chest a feeling rose that she did not have a name for. She read the letter slowly. Dear Miss Calloway, it began. My name is Sterling Whitmore. I am the executor of the estate of Adelaide Holloway, who passed away on July 14th of last year. Mrs. Holloway was your maternal grandmother. In her will, she left specific instructions that upon your 18th birthday you were to receive full ownership of her property at 412 Sycamore Street, Milbrook, North Carolina, a restaurant known locally as Adelaide's Table. The enclosed key opens the front door. Mrs. Holloway asked that I convey the following message to you. Tell her I never stopped looking. Tell her the door is open. Wren read the letter 3 times. The words did not change, but their meaning shifted with each reading, rearranging themselves in her mind like furniture in a room she had never been allowed to enter. Maternal grandmother. She had a grandmother. She had a grandmother who had died 8 months ago. She had a grandmother who had left her a building. Ms. Hollister was watching her from the desk. Wren, are you all right? Wren's voice came out quieter than she meant. I had a grandmother. Ms. Hollister moved around the desk and read the letter over Wren's shoulder. Her hand went to her mouth. Milbrook. That's about 3 hours south of here. Small town, pine country, near the Uwharrie Forest. She left me a restaurant. She left you a home. Ms. Hollister corrected her quietly. There's a difference. Wren looked down at the key in her palm. The story she had carried her entire life cracked right down the middle. Her caseworkers had told her in the careful, pitying tones reserved for orphan children that her mother's people were gone, that there was no one on that side. It had never occurred to Wren to question it. When you grow up in foster care, you learn early that asking about family only leads to dead ends and silence. You stop asking. But here was a key, and a letter from a dead woman who shared her blood, a woman who had apparently been looking for her. And the door was open. Ms. Hollister drove her to the Greyhound station that same morning. She bought the ticket with her own credit card and pressed it into Wren's hand and refused to let her refuse. You can pay me back when you're settled. Go find out what's waiting for you. The bus pulled out of Charlotte at 11:15. Wren sat by the window with her garbage bag on the seat beside her, and the brass key in her front pocket pressing against her thigh like a small, patient heartbeat. The city thinned and fell away. Shopping centers gave way to pine forests. 6-lane highway narrowed to 4, then 2. Red clay shoulders appeared along the roadside. Farmland opened up in broad, flat stretches broken by barns and silos, and the occasional white church steeple rising out of the trees. Wren ate the granola bar Karen had given her. She watched the world change through fingerprinted glass. She did not know what she was heading toward. A restaurant, an empty building, the ghost of a woman she had never met. It could be nothing. It could be another dead end in a life full of them. But the key was real, and someone had left a door open for her. That was more than anyone had ever offered Wren Calloway before. The bus pulled into Milbrook just after 2 in the afternoon. The stop was not a station, just a bench and a wooden sign on the shoulder of the main road through town. Wren stepped off with her garbage bag and her backpack and stood blinking in the southern afternoon sun. Milbrook was small, one main street lined with brick storefronts, some occupied, some empty. A hardware store with hand-painted lettering on the window. A diner with a faded green awning, the sign reading Loretta's in cursive script. A post office. A church with a white steeple at the far end of the road. Pickup trucks angled along the curb. A few people moved along the sidewalks at the unhurried pace of a place that had decided long ago that noise was unnecessary. It was the kind of town where a man could grow old without anyone asking him to explain himself. Wren walked. She had the address from the letter. 412 Sycamore Street. A woman coming out of the post office pointed her in the right direction, looking at her garbage bag with curious but kind eyes. 2 blocks down. Take a left at the church. You can't miss it, honey. Wren found it on the corner of Sycamore and Main. A single-story brick building with a wide front window and a painted sign above the door that read, Adelaide's Table in faded green letters. The building was old, but it was not ruined. The brickwork was clean. The window glass was intact. The concrete step in front of the door had been swept recently. Someone had been taking care of this place. Wren stood on the sidewalk and looked at the building for a long time. A restaurant her grandmother had run. A restaurant in a town she had never visited, by a woman she had never known. And now it belonged to her, an 18-year-old girl with $41 in a garbage bag of clothes. She pulled the brass key from her pocket. The metal was warm from her body heat. She climbed the single step. She fit the key into the lock. She turned it. The mechanism resisted, then gave way with a heavy, deliberate click. She pushed the door open. The smell hit her first. Not dust, not mildew, not the dead air of a building that had been closed up for years. Something else. Lemon oil and old wood, and underneath it all the faintest trace of cooking spices. Cumin, garlic, something sweet she could not name. The restaurant smelled like someone had been cooking in it recently, though the letter said it had been closed for 3 years. Wren stepped inside. Late afternoon light slanted through the front window. It cast long gold rectangles across the wooden floor. The dining room was small, maybe 10 tables, each one covered with a white tablecloth protected by clear plastic. The chairs were wooden, mismatched, but sturdy, pushed neatly into place. A long counter with 6 stools ran along the left wall backed by a pass-through window into the kitchen. Everything was clean, not just preserved, maintained. No cobwebs, no dust on the tables. The floor had been mopped. The windows had been washed. Someone had been coming in here, keeping this place alive while it waited. But it was the walls that stopped Wren cold. Every wall was covered in framed photographs, dozens of them. And in photograph after photograph, the same young woman looked back at her. Dark hair, wide smile, a jaw that Wren recognized because it was her own. Eyes that Wren recognized because she had seen them in the cracked mirror of 7 different bathrooms over 14 years. Her mother, June Holloway, at maybe 20 years old, standing in front of this very building with a banner behind her that read, Grand Opening. June laughing in the kitchen with flour on her nose. June holding a baby wrapped in a yellow blanket, both of them squinting into a hard summer sun. Wren recognized the blanket. She had seen a photograph of that blanket once in a caseworker's file when she was 9 years old. The blanket she had been wrapped in the day the police pulled her out of the wreckage. That baby in the picture was her. Her legs went soft underneath her. She grabbed the edge of the counter and held on. The wood was cool under her palm. The whole room seemed to tilt. Her mother was everywhere in this place. every wall, every surface, every corner. Adelaide had turned this restaurant into a gallery of her daughter's life, a place where June would never be forgotten, where anyone who walked through the door would know who June Holloway was, and that she had been loved. Wren walked along the wall slowly, studying each photograph. June as a teenager sitting on a porch railing with a guitar across her lap. June in a graduation cap and gown holding a rolled diploma. June in this kitchen, stirring something in a massive pot, looking over her shoulder at the camera with a grin that Wren had never seen on her own face in any mirror. June holding baby Wren on her hip, both of them squinting into the sun, the yellow blanket trailing down behind them like a sail. In every picture, June looked happy. She looked like a woman who had been deeply, completely loved. Wren reached the end of the counter where the photograph stopped. There, pinned to a small corkboard on a clean stretch of wall, was a single handwritten note on yellow paper. This wall is for Wren's pictures when she comes home. Wren stopped breathing. The air went out of her chest. She read the note again. Her name. Her own name written in another woman's handwriting, pinned to a wall in a building she had never seen. A space waiting for her. A literal physical space on the wall of this restaurant reserved for a granddaughter the world had told her was dead. Wren pressed her palm flat against the empty wall. The cool plaster pressed back. She stayed there for a long time, not crying. Not yet. Just feeling the wall. When she finally turned around, she noticed something she had missed. On the counter beside the cash register sat a sealed envelope, cream-colored, thick, the kind of paper meant for important documents. Across the front, in careful, cursive handwriting, someone had written 4 words. For Wren when she comes home. Wren picked it up. The paper was heavy in her hands. She could feel something inside beyond just a letter, something stiff, like a photograph or a card. She ran her thumb under the seal. The envelope opened. Inside was a folded letter, several pages thick, written in the same careful handwriting, and tucked behind the letter a single photograph. A woman in her late 60s, silver hair pulled back, thin face, sharp blue eyes, standing in the doorway of this restaurant with her arms thrown open wide. The kind of pose a person makes when they are welcoming someone home. On the back in pencil 4 words, Adelaide Holloway, 2020, waiting. Wren sat down on a counter stool. The legs scraped softly across the floor. She placed the photograph face up on the counter and unfolded the first page of the letter. The handwriting was steady, but the ink had slight tremors in the longer strokes, the marks of a hand that was growing tired. My dearest Wren, if you are reading this, then you found your way here just like I always believed you would. Wren's hands shook. She smoothed the letter flat on the counter and read. Adelaide had written 6 pages, front and back. The pen had bled through the paper in places. The handwriting grew slightly more uneven toward the end of the letter, as if she had paused to rest and come back to it more than once. I want you to know something before you read another word. You were wanted. You were loved. Every single day of your life, even the days you did not know I existed, I was thinking about you. Wren's throat closed. She kept reading. Adelaide wrote about June, about a little girl who used to stand on a step stool in the kitchen and stir whatever was on the stove, whether it needed stirring or not. About a teenager who played guitar on the back porch and sang too loud and burned every batch of cookies she ever attempted. Until one afternoon when she was 16, something clicked in her, and she started cooking with the confidence of a woman twice her age. Your mother's food was her language, Adelaide wrote. She could say things with a pot of soup that she could not say with words. When your mother died, the world ended. She was 28 years old. She was my only child, and I was told that you had died with her. Wren stopped reading. She set the letter down. She pressed her fingers against her eyes until she saw white sparks behind the lids. Her father. She did not need to read the next paragraph to know what was coming. Some part of her had always known. Some quiet, instinctive part of her had always understood that the story she had been told about her mother's family was wrong. She picked the letter back up. Your father called me the day after the accident. He told me neither of you had survived. I believed him because I had no reason not to. I buried my daughter and I grieved for you both, and for 3 months I could not get out of bed. But something never sat right with me. There was no funeral for you. No death certificate I could find in the county records. No grave beside your mother's. When I asked your father for details, the phone number was disconnected. He had moved. He had vanished. I started asking questions and nobody had answers. And that is when I began to wonder. Adelaide had described what came next. She had hired a private investigator out of Raleigh, a man named Mason Crawford, who had charged her $400 a month and sent her reports that were mostly dead ends. She had written letters to Child Protective Services in 3 counties. She had driven to Charlotte and sat in government offices waiting for clerks to check records that were sealed or lost or incomplete. She had done this for 14 years. I never found you, Adelaide wrote, but I never stopped looking, and I never believed you were dead. A grandmother knows Wren. I cannot explain it any better than that. I knew you were out there. I knew that one day you would need a place to come home to. So I built one. The letter explained the restaurant. After June's death, Adelaide had taken every recipe her daughter had ever scribbled on napkins and the backs of grocery lists, and she had opened a restaurant with them. Every dish on the menu was something June had made. The cornbread, the pot roast, the black-eyed peas, the peach cobbler that people drove 30 miles for. All of it, June's. This restaurant is your mother's legacy, Adelaide wrote. And now it is yours. Everything in it belongs to you. The building, the equipment, the recipes, the photographs, and the love that went into every wall and every plate. Hollis next door will explain the practical things. I have left funds to keep the lights on. But the important thing is this. You are not alone. You never were. The letter closed with a single line that Wren read over and over until the words blurred on the page. I am sorry I ran out of time, but the door is open. It will always be open. Come home. Wren folded the letter slowly and pressed it flat against her chest. She held it there like she was trying to make her ribs absorb the words. The restaurant was quiet around her. Through the front window, the light had turned the color of weak tea. Cars passed occasionally on Sycamore Street. A dog barked somewhere far off. Normal life continued outside, while inside the world Wren had carried for 14 years quietly broke apart. She had been told she was unwanted. She had been told her mother's family had no interest in her, and instead there had been a woman in this town spending every spare dollar on private investigators, and driving to Charlotte and sitting in waiting rooms and building a restaurant out of her dead daughter's recipes. A woman leaving a wall blank for photographs of a granddaughter the world had said was gone. Wren did not cry, not yet. Crying would come later when she was alone in the dark. For now, she sat very still and let the new shape of her life settle around her, like dust settling after a building collapses. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood up. She needed to see the rest of this place. The kitchen was behind the pass-through window, accessible through a swinging door at the end of the counter. Wren pushed through it and stopped. The kitchen was spotless. Stainless steel surfaces gleamed under fluorescent lights that flickered to life when she found the switch. A commercial stove with 6 burners and a flat grill sat against the back wall. A double sink. A long prep counter. A walk-in cooler that hummed faintly when she pulled the handle open. Cold and empty, but running. Someone had been keeping the power on. Someone had been keeping the cooler running for 3 years, waiting for the day someone would walk through the front door. On the main prep counter sat a thick 3-ring binder with a laminated cover. The label on the front read, Adelaide's Table Recipes. Wren opened it. The pages were organized by category. Soups, mains, sides, desserts, breads. Each recipe was written out by hand, but in 2 different styles. The first handwriting was loose and confident with notes in the margins like, needs more salt. Double the garlic. Trust me. The second handwriting was Adelaide's careful cursive filling in measurements and cooking times and occasional notes that said things like, June never measured this. I watched her make it 40 times before I got it right. 2 women's voices in a binder. A daughter who cooked by instinct. A mother who translated that instinct into something anyone could follow. A knock at the front door made Wren jump. She set the binder down and walked back through the dining room. Through the glass of the front door, she could see a man on the step. He was old, maybe late 70s, tall but slightly stooped at the shoulders the way a man stoops, who has spent his life lifting heavy things. He had a full head of white hair, kept short and neat. A face that looked like it had been carved out of hardwood and then weathered by 40 winters. He wore a canvas work jacket, heavy boots, hands at his sides that looked like they could still do a day's labor without complaining. His eyes were deep-set and dark, and they were fixed on Wren's face with an expression she could not read. Wren opened the door. The man did not move for a long moment. He just looked at her, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough, the kind of voice that came from decades of not talking much, of saying only what needed to be said. You look like her, he said quietly. You look just like June. Wren did not know what to say. Who are you, Hollis Crane? I own the hardware store next door. He paused. Owned it. I'm retired now, but I've been keeping an eye on this place. His gaze moved past her, to the restaurant interior, to the photographs on the walls, back to her face. Adelaide told me you would come. I promised her I would be here when you did. Wren stepped aside and let him in. Hollis moved through the dining room the way a man moves through his own kitchen. He knew where every chair was. He knew the floorboard that creaked near the second table. He did not touch anything, but his eyes lingered on the photographs, on the covered tables, on the counter where Adelaide's letter still lay open. You read her letter? It was not a question. Yes. Hollis lowered himself onto a stool at the counter, the same way a man sits down in his own kitchen. His knees popped softly. He laid his hands flat on the counter, palms down, and Wren saw how thick his fingers were. The kind of hands that had hammered 10,000 nails and never once complained. Then you know the bones of it. She looked for you for a long time. 14 years, Wren said. 14 years. Hollis repeated it like he was still counting. She showed up at my store one Tuesday morning with a cardboard box. Private investigator reports, letters she had written to the state, copies of requests she had filed with courts, She spread them out on my counter and she said, "Hollis, I have proof my granddaughter is alive, and nobody will listen to me." What did you tell her I told her I would listen? Did you believe her? Hollis met her eyes. Adelaide Holloway did not lie, and she did not chase fantasies. If she said you were alive, I believed her. I just couldn't help her prove it. He looked down at his hands. I made her a promise the year she got sick. I promised I would keep this place standing until you came through that door. I promised her she would not have built it for nothing. He paused. I kept that promise for 3 years, every Sunday. Mopped the floors, ran the water in the pipes so they would not seize, washed the windows, dusted the photographs. He looked up. Today I am done keeping that promise. Wren did not trust herself to speak. She could feel something rising in her chest that had no shape yet. Gratitude, grief, anger. They were all the same color. "Are you hungry?" Hollis asked. The question caught her off guard. What hungry? When did you last eat? Wren thought about the granola bar on the bus, the half-finished container of crackers from yesterday, this morning. Sort of. Hollis stood up. Kitchen works, gas is on, water is on. There should be cornmeal and buttermilk in the pantry. Adelaide kept the staples stocked. He moved toward the door. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. There are some things at my place I should bring." He left before Wren could object. She stood alone in the restaurant. The silence settled. Then she walked back into the kitchen and opened the pantry door. Inside, on neatly arranged shelves, sat exactly what Hollis had said would be there. Bags of stone-ground cornmeal sealed in airtight containers, flour, canned goods, beans, tomatoes, broth, salt, pepper, sugar, baking soda, the basics, enough. Wren pulled the recipe binder toward her and opened it to the cornbread page. June's original note was just 3 lines. Cornmeal, buttermilk, a little sugar, hot skillet. You will know when it is done. Below it, Adelaide had written out the full recipe. 2 cups stone-ground yellow cornmeal, 1 cup buttermilk, a tablespoon of sugar, half a teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, cast iron skillet preheated in the oven at 400 degrees. Pour the batter into the screaming hot skillet. 20 minutes until golden. At the bottom of the page in Adelaide's handwriting, "This was the first recipe I perfected. It took me 11 tries." On the 12th, Hollis from next door ate a piece and said, "That is June's cornbread." I sat down and cried. Wren stared at the page. She found a cast iron skillet hanging on a rack above the stove. She turned the oven dial to 400 and slid the skillet into heat. She measured the cornmeal into a mixing bowl. She cracked an egg. She poured the buttermilk. Her hands remembered motions she did not know she had learned. Mrs. Reeves, the foster mother who had given her the jade pendant, had also taught her to cook. Not fancy things, just basics. How to make biscuits. How to fry an egg without burning the edges. How to tell when cornbread was done by the sound it made when you tapped the top. The smell reached the dining room within 5 minutes. By 10 minutes, it had filled the entire building. A warm, golden smell that was equal parts grain and butter, and something harder to name: comfort, memory. The smell of food made by someone who cared whether you ate. Hollis came back carrying a paper bag. He set it on the counter without a word. Inside were 2 jars of homemade blackberry jam, a tub of butter, and a glass jug of sweet tea. He sat down on his stool, the same stool he had sat in before, the third from the left. He waited. When the timer went off, Wren pulled the cornbread from the oven. It was perfect. Golden on top, slightly dark around the edges where the batter had hit the screaming hot iron. She cut it into wedges. She set one on a plate. She slid it across the counter to Hollis. He did not speak. He broke the wedge in half. He spread butter on one piece. He took a bite. Then he closed his eyes. He sat very still for a long moment. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. But he did not cry. He was not a man who would cry in front of a stranger. He just nodded once, slowly. "That's her," he said. "That's Adelaide." Wren stood behind the counter. She did not eat. She watched this old man, this carpenter, this widower, this keeper of a promise sit at her grandmother's counter and taste her grandmother's recipe for the first time in 3 years. He took another bite. "I told her I'd wait," he said. "I told her I'd wait as long as it took." Wren's eyes burned. She turned away. She wiped her face on her sleeve. Hollis ate the rest of the wedge in silence. Then he wiped his hands on a paper napkin and stood up slowly. "There's an office," he said, through the door behind the kitchen. "Adelaide spent a lot of time in there, especially toward the end. You should see it." He moved toward the front door. "I'll leave you to it." "But Wren," he stopped in the doorway. He looked back at her. "Home isn't where they keep you. It's where someone kept a place for you." He nodded once. He stepped out into the evening. Wren stood alone in the restaurant. She listened to the door close behind him. She listened to his boots on the sidewalk. She listened to the silence settle back into the building like dust falling. Then she walked to the office door behind the kitchen and opened it. The office was small. A wooden desk, a filing cabinet, a bookshelf, a single window that looked out on the back alley. The desk was covered in papers, neatly organized into stacks, secured with rubber bands. A corkboard on the wall above the desk held pinned photographs, blurry, distant. Photographs of a girl Wren did not at first recognize. A yearbook photo. A grainy image of a child standing in a food bank line. Another shot of a teenager at what looked like a school assembly taken from too far away. Wren stepped closer. The girl in the photographs was her. Adelaide had collected these. Somehow, over years, snapshots scraped from public records and school databases. Proof. Evidence pinned to a wall. Proof that her granddaughter existed somewhere in the world, even when the world insisted she did not. Wren sat down at the desk. The chair was an old wooden swivel chair. It creaked under her weight. She placed her hands flat on the desk and felt the worn finish under her palms. This was the desk where Adelaide had spent 14 years writing letters, making phone calls, following dead leads, refusing to stop. Wren opened the top drawer of the filing cabinet. It was full of folders, each one labeled by year. Mason Crawford Investigations. 14 folders. 14 years of bills and reports and dead ends. She closed the top drawer. She opened the second drawer. Tax records, business documents, receipts. She opened the third drawer. This one was different. Inside lay a single thick manila folder, worn at the edges, labeled in Adelaide's handwriting with one word. Wren. Wren pulled the folder out and laid it on the desk. She opened it. The first page was a photocopy, faded, edges curled. Wren leaned closer. She froze. The lamp on the desk hummed faintly. Outside the window, the alley was going dark. In her hands was a death certificate. The name on it was Wren Calloway. Date of death: the same day as June Holloway's accident. Cause of death: motor vehicle collision. Filed by Roderick Calloway, her father. Wren stared at the document. Her own name, her own date of birth. Declared dead at age 4. by a man who had then left her with his sister and vanished from the face of the earth. He had killed her on paper. He had erased her from the one person in the world who would have come for her, who would have taken her home and raised her and loved her. He had told Adelaide that her granddaughter was dead, and then he had made it official. The death certificate shook in Wren's hands. She set it down carefully on the desk. She pressed the edges flat with her fingers. She did not move for a long time. The room was silent. The lamp hummed. The window was dark. Somewhere out on Sycamore Street, a single porch light came on, and a man's voice called a dog inside for the night. Then the silence returned. Wren sat at her grandmother's desk with a piece of paper in front of her that explained 14 years of her life. A piece of paper signed by her own father. A piece of paper that had stolen her grandmother from her and her grandmother from herself, and her mother's memory from both of them. She did not cry. She placed her palm flat over the death certificate. She closed her eyes, and in the quiet of that small office in a small town in North Carolina, in a restaurant built by a woman who had spent 14 years refusing to believe a lie, Wren Calloway began to understand the true weight of what had been done to her, and what she was going to have to do about it. Wren did not sleep that night. She sat at Adelaide's desk until the light outside the window faded to black, and then she sat in the dark. The death certificate lay face down on the desk where she had placed it. She did not need to read it again. The words were already carved into her, scratched into the soft places behind her ribs where nothing could reach them. Roderick Calloway, her father. The man who had walked away when she was 6 years old, leaving her on a stained couch in his sister's apartment with a black eye and a sleeping bag and a paper sack of clothes. The man she had hated for 12 years because he had abandoned her. Tonight she understood that abandonment was the smallest thing he had done. He had erased her. He had picked up a telephone the day after the accident and told a grieving mother that her granddaughter was dead. And then he had filed a piece of paper that turned the lie into something official, something legal, something that would stop anyone from looking for her. And Marin had known. Wren's aunt, the woman who had kept her for 11 months before surrendering her to the state. The woman who had known the lie existed and had never picked up a telephone in 12 years to say, "Your granddaughter is alive. She is in Charlotte. Come and get her." Wren pressed her forehead against her knees. 14 years in foster homes while a woman 200 miles south spent every spare dollar trying to find her. 7 families. 7 bedrooms that were never hers. 7 kitchens where she had learned to cook and clean and make herself useful, because useful children got to stay longer. And the whole time there had been a grandmother who wanted her. She cried in the dark, quietly, with the discipline of someone who had learned in group homes that noise meant attention, and attention was never good. When the sky outside the window began to lighten, Wren wiped her face with the heel of her hand and stood up. Her body was stiff from sitting all night. Her neck ached. She walked into the kitchen and turned on the tap and splashed cold water on her face. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The stainless steel surfaces reflected her back at herself. A tired girl with swollen eyes standing in a dead woman's kitchen. The front door opened just after 7. She did not move. She already knew who it was. Hollis came through the dining room carrying 2 paper cups in a small brown bag. He set them on the counter. He looked at her through the pass-through window. He did not say good morning. He did not ask how she had slept. He had already taken the measure of her face. Coffee's black. Didn't know how you take it. There's sugar in the bag. Wren came out of the kitchen and sat on a stool. The coffee was hot and strong, and she drank half of it before she spoke. He told her I was dead. Hollis did not move. I know. He filed a death certificate with my name on it. Hollis wrapped both hands around his cup. He looked at the counter. Adelaide showed me that document 6 years ago. She had gotten a copy of it through one of her court filings. She sat right where you're sitting now. She put it in front of me. She said, "Hollis, someone forged my granddaughter's death. I need you to tell me I'm not crazy." What did you tell her? I told her she was the sanest woman I knew. And then I told her to take it to a lawyer. And she did. She did. The lawyer told her it would take years to untangle. And even if she proved the certificate was false, there was no guarantee the state would help her find a living child in the foster system. Privacy laws, sealed records. She would need a court order. She would need to prove standing. She would need money she didn't have. He took a slow drink. She kept looking anyway. 14 years of looking for a girl the world told her was dead. And she never stopped. They sat in silence for a while. Morning light came through the front window and caught the dust in the air. "Tell me about her," Wren said. Hollis set his cup down. Adelaide was stubborn. That's the first thing you need to know. Most stubborn woman I ever met. And I was married to a woman who once refused to leave a hospital waiting room for 36 hours because the doctors told her she could not see her sister. What was your wife's name? Marlene. She passed in 1998. He said it the way old men say the names of their wives, like the word was a piece of furniture they had carried with them through every room of their life. Adelaide was worse than Marlene when she decided something was true. No amount of evidence was going to change her mind. And she decided you were alive. How did she start the restaurant? After June died, Adelaide fell apart. Stopped going out. Stopped answering her phone. I'd check on her every few days, and I would find her sitting in her kitchen surrounded by your mother's recipe cards, just reading them over and over. Then one morning she came into my store, walked in like nothing had happened. And she said, "Hollis, I need to rent the building next door." And you helped her. I helped her buy it. The owner was a man named Riggs. He wanted to dump it. He'd been carrying it empty for 2 years. He sold it to Adelaide for $12,000 cash. I don't know where she got the money. She never told me. I never asked. And she cooked. She cooked. Every recipe your mother ever wrote down. She stood in that kitchen for a full year getting them right. Your mother never wrote things down properly. She'd scribble some flour and cook until it smells right. Adelaide had to stand in this kitchen and make every dish dozens of times until she could taste her daughter in it. Hollis paused. His voice dropped. His voice. She didn't cook to fill the restaurant. She cooked so the smell would carry. So wherever you were, some part of you might remember. Wren looked at the photographs on the wall. Her mother's face, young, laughing, flour on her nose. Was the restaurant busy? Packed. Every lunch, every dinner. People came from 3 counties. Adelaide's cornbread was famous. Her pot roast was the best thing I ever ate. And Marlene was no slouch in the kitchen. He smiled briefly. Don't tell her I said that. When did Adelaide get sick? The smile faded from his face. About 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. By the time they found it, there wasn't much to do. She kept cooking for as long as she could. When she couldn't stand at the stove anymore, she sat in the office and directed me. I'm a terrible cook, but she talked me through things well enough to keep the doors open for another few months. And then she closed. He took another sip of coffee. 3 years ago this past January. She called me over. She said, "Hollis, I can't do this anymore. But don't you dare let this building fall apart. She's coming." I told her I'd take care of it, and I did. Wren finished her coffee. She looked around the dining room, at the clean tables, at the washed windows, at the photographs Hollis had dusted every week for 3 years. "I need to do something," she said. "Like what I don't know. Something with my hands." Hollis studied her for a moment. Then he stood up, cleaning supplies in the back closet. Mop, bucket, rags. Floors are due. He left her to it. Wren found the closet. She filled a bucket with hot water and dish soap. She started mopping. She began in the kitchen because it felt right, working the mop across the floor in long, steady strokes. The physical motion loosened something in her chest that had been wound tight all night. She scrubbed the prep counters. She wiped down the stove burners. She cleaned the inside of the walk-in cooler, which was empty except for a box of baking soda Hollis had placed on the shelf years ago to keep the air sweet. In the dining room, she mopped every inch of the floor. She washed the windows with vinegar and old newspaper the way Mrs. Reeves had taught her when she was 9. By noon, her arms ached, and her back was sore, and the restaurant smelled like lemon soap and clean wood. She stood in the middle of the dining room. For the first time in years, she had done something that mattered. A knock at the door. Wren opened it and found a woman on the step. She was in her 50s, broad-shouldered dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She carried a cardboard box on her hip, the way another woman might carry a child. "You must be Wren. I'm Loretta Beaumont. I run the diner across the street. Hollis told me you were here." He did. Hollis told everyone. I think he's been waiting 3 years to make that phone call. She shifted the box. "I brought you some things. Food mostly. And some cleaning supplies, though it looks like you found your own." Wren took the box. Inside were containers of soup and rice, a loaf of bread, apples, a bag of potatoes, dish soap, sponges, a package of paper towels. At the bottom, folded carefully, a dish towel with a small note pinned to it. Adelaide would be proud. "Welcome home, Loretta." "Thank you," Wren said. Her voice cracked on the second word. Loretta stepped inside without waiting, the way people in small towns do when they have decided already that you belong to them. She looked around the dining room and nodded. "You've been busy. This place looks good." She ran her hand along the counter. "I used to eat here twice a week. Adelaide made a black-eyed pea soup that I have tried to replicate for 3 years, and I can't get it right. It's in the recipe binder." Loretta's eyes lit up. "Don't you dare show me. I'm not ready to admit defeat." She paused. Her voice softened. "Listen, I know you just got here and you're probably overwhelmed, but this town cared about Adelaide, and they're going to care about you. Give them a chance." She left as easily as she had arrived. Wren stood in the doorway and watched her cross the street and disappear into the diner with the faded green awning. She closed the door. For 3 days after that, the restaurant began to change. Hollis arrived the first morning with a toolbox and a man from the church whose name Wren never learned. They spent 4 hours fixing the front door hinge, which had been sticking and replacing 2 ceiling tiles that had started to bow from moisture in the roofline. The man from the church looked at the painted sign above the entrance and said the green was fading. Hollis told him to go ahead. Loretta came by with a box of kitchen supplies, mixing bowls, wooden spoons, a set of sharp knives in a canvas roll. "These were sitting in my storage room," she said. "I'd rather they get used." Wren suspected they were not from a storage room. She accepted them without argument. A woman she had never met dropped off a flat of eggs and a gallon of whole milk. She said her name was Janelle Marsh and she had a farm outside town. Adelaide had bought eggs from her every week for 19 years. "I've got more than I can sell," Janelle said. I'll bring some by on Tuesdays. By the second evening, the restaurant looked different. The front door swung smoothly. The ceiling was patched. Fresh green paint gleamed on the sign above the entrance. Someone had left a potted geranium by the front step. The walk-in cooler, which had been empty for 3 years now, held eggs and milk and butter and a bag of apples. Wren stood in the middle of the dining room and tried to understand what was happening. She had been in this town for less than a week. She had not asked anyone for anything. And yet, people she had never met were bringing food and fixing things and treating this building like it mattered to them personally. Hollis explained it simply. Adelaide fed this town for 17 years. You think they forgot that? On the third night, Wren sat at the office desk and opened Adelaide's journal. She had found it in the third drawer of the filing cabinet on the first morning. A black leather cover worn soft at the edges. A ribbon bookmark. She had not been ready to read it yet. Now she was. She opened to the first page. The date was 14 years ago. The handwriting was Adelaide's careful cursive. Started looking for Wren today. Called Mason and asked him to search the foster care records in Mecklenburg County. He said it could take months. I told him I had years. Wren turned the pages slowly. The journal was a record of Adelaide's search written in the margins of her daily life. Entries about the restaurant sat alongside entries about dead-end leads and unanswered letters. Peach cobbler recipe finally right. June would have added more cinnamon. She was always wrong about cinnamon. Mason called. No records in Mecklenburg. Trying Cabarrus County next. A woman came in today with her granddaughter. The little girl sat at the counter and ate cornbread with jam and talked about school. I went into the kitchen and cried for 10 minutes. Filed another request with DSS, third one this year. They sent back the same form letter. Wren read for an hour. The entries spanned years. Some months had daily entries. Others had gaps of weeks followed by a burst of activity when a new lead surfaced. Then she came to an entry from 8 years ago. The date stopped her. She would have been 10 years old. She read it twice. Mason came back today with something. He's been working a contact at the state office. He thinks he has found a girl. Mecklenburg County group home. Age and date of birth match. He's going to drive up next week and see if he can confirm. The next entry was dated 2 weeks later. Mason went to Charlotte. He spoke with a caseworker. She would not give him information. He tried to file a request with the county. They said the file was closed. He pressed. They said it had been closed 18 months ago, and the records had been sealed. He came back with nothing. Something is wrong. Closed files do not get sealed. Not in foster care. Not without a court order. Wren stopped reading. She set the journal down. She did not move for a long time. In 2018, when she was 10 years old, her grandmother had been one telephone call away. One driveway away. One stranger willing to look up a name in a database away. And someone had closed the file. She found the next mention 3 pages later. Mason has filed an open records request. We are going to find out who closed that file and why. Then, a month later, request denied. Sealed by order of the supervisor. No appeal possible without a court order. Mason says we are at a dead end unless we can hire a real attorney. I cannot afford a real attorney. I have spent $40,000 on Mason already. The restaurant is barely covering itself. I do not know what to do. The next entry was a week after that. I called the supervisor's office. I left a message. Nobody called back. The next. I called the supervisor's office. Nobody answered. The next. I drove to Charlotte today and sat in the waiting room of the Department of Social Services for 6 hours. They told me the supervisor was in meetings all day. I went home. Then a longer entry. I am 63 years old. I have spent 14 years and almost everything I have looking for my granddaughter. The state will not help me. The courts will not help me. The man who did this is gone. I do not know where he went. I have a death certificate that says my granddaughter is dead, and I have a feeling in my chest that says she is alive. That is all I have. I am running out of time. Wren closed the journal. She held it against her chest. She pressed the soft leather to her ribs and felt the weight of 14 years through the cover. She put the journal back in the drawer. She closed the drawer. She turned off the office lamp. She walked to the small room behind the office where she had been sleeping, and she lay down on the narrow cot in the dark. The next morning she went to work. She started by cooking through the recipe binder. Soups first. She made a pot of black-eyed pea soup and walked a container of it across the street to Loretta, who tasted it standing behind her diner counter and shook her head slowly. "That's it," Loretta said. "That's the one." "How much garlic?" "The recipe says 4 cloves. I used 6. Loretta sighed, Adelaide and her secrets. She told me 3. Wren made the pot roast next. It took 4 hours. The smell filled the restaurant so completely that Hollis came through the front door without knocking and stood in the dining room with his eyes closed for a long minute. I could smell that from my porch. She made peach cobbler. It needed 2 attempts. The first came out too sweet. The second was right. She knew it was right because she tasted it and felt something click, the same way Adelaide had written about June's cooking. Not a recipe followed. A feeling recognized. She cleaned every surface twice. She organized the pantry. She ordered supplies from a wholesale company in the next county using money from the account Adelaide had left. Hollis drove her to the county health department to start the inspection paperwork. The inspector, a man who had eaten at Adelaide's table for 15 years, told her the kitchen was already in better shape than most restaurants he visited. "Adelaide kept this place surgical," he said. "Looks like you do too." She thought for the first time in a long time that she might be able to do this. On the 5th morning, a black SUV pulled up to the curb outside the front window. It was the kind of car nobody in Milbrook drove. Tinted windows, out-of-state plates, the kind of car a man arrives in when he wants you to know he has come from somewhere else and he is not staying long. A man got out. Mid-50s, tall, wearing a slate-gray suit that did not fit a small-town Main Street. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking at the green-painted sign above the door, and Wren saw him write something in a small leather notebook before he tucked it into his inside pocket. He climbed the step. He opened the door. "You must be Miss Calloway," he said. His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of voice that had closed 1,000 contracts. "My name is Dalton Royce. I represent Cornerstone Retail Holdings. Do you have a minute?" Wren stood behind the counter. She did not invite him in. She did not have to. He was already in. What is this about? Royce smiled. It was the kind of smile a man uses when he wants you to feel reasonable about something unreasonable. "It's about this building. I'd like to make you an offer. It's not for sale." "I understand. May I sit?" He did not wait for an answer. He pulled out a stool and sat. He set a slim leather folio on the counter and unbuttoned the top button of his suit jacket. "Miss Calloway, I want to be straightforward with you. I know you are new here. I know you inherited this property less than a week ago. I'm not here to take advantage of that. I'm here to make sure you understand the situation you've walked into. What situation? He opened the folio. He removed a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the counter. This property has $18,000 in delinquent back taxes owed to the county, accumulated over the 3 years it sat closed. Your grandmother, God rest her, paid the property taxes on it the year she died. Nothing since. Wren stared at the paper. The numbers were highlighted in yellow. $18,000. The figure swam in front of her eyes. The county put a lien on the property 18 months ago. Royce continued. 6 weeks ago, my company purchased that lien from the county at auction. We do this regularly. It's a perfectly legal arrangement. He paused. You have 30 days to pay the full balance plus interest and our administrative fees. If you cannot pay within that window, the property reverts to Cornerstone, at which point we will demolish this building and put up a 1,200 square foot convenience store on the lot. He smiled again. Smaller this time. I am offering today to buy you out at fair market value before the lien period expires. Cash. $45,000. You sign the deed over, you walk away with enough money to start a real life somewhere. You don't have to deal with the back taxes, the upkeep, the insurance. The whole thing becomes my problem. Wren did not move. She did not look at the paper. She looked at the man. Then she looked at the wall, at the photographs of her mother, at the empty space with the small handwritten note pinned to it. This wall is for Wren's pictures when she comes home. She looked back at Royce. Get out. Royce did not flinch. He had heard this before, from farmers, from widows, from children who inherited buildings they did not understand. He had heard it from 1,000 small mouths in 1,000 small towns. He stood up calmly. He buttoned his jacket. He placed a business card on the counter beside the paper. Take a few days. Talk to a lawyer if you have one. Talk to someone who knows what $18,000 looks like to an 18-year-old with no income. I am not your enemy, Miss Calloway. I am the most generous offer you are going to get. He walked out. Wren stood behind the counter for a long minute. The paper was still on the counter. The business card sat beside it. Dalton Royce, Senior Acquisitions Director, Cornerstone Retail Holdings, an address in Charlotte. She picked up the business card. She tore it in half. She tore it in half again. She dropped the pieces into the trash bin beneath the counter. Then she sat down on a stool. She put her head in her hands. Hollis found her there 20 minutes later. He had seen the black SUV through his front window. He had walked over the moment it pulled away. He sat down beside her at the counter. He did not ask. He waited. Wren slid the paper across to him. He read it slowly. His jaw tightened. His hands flattened against the counter. 18,000, he said quietly. 30 days. I see. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was careful. The voice of a man choosing his words because he knew how much they would weigh. Wren, you are 18 years old. You have been here 6 days. This is not a burden you have to carry. She looked at him. What are you saying? I am saying you have an offer in your hand. $45,000 is a lot of money for someone in your position. You could take it. You could go to school. You could rent an apartment. You could build a life that does not begin with $18,000 of someone else's debt. This is my grandmother's restaurant. It is. And she would not want you to drown in it. She spent 14 years looking for me, and she would not want you to spend the next 14 paying off her property taxes. Wren looked at him. His face was kind. His eyes were tired. He meant every word. and she understood suddenly and completely that this was the moment. This was the moment that had been waiting for her since the door swung open 6 days ago. This was the moment when she decided whether she had come home or whether she had only come to visit. She stood up from the stool. "Hollis," he looked up, "you promised her. You promised her you would keep this place standing until I came through that door. You kept that promise. For 3 years. You washed the windows, you dusted the photographs, you ran the water through the pipes." She picked up the paper. She held it in front of him. "You did your part. Now I have to do mine." Hollis looked at her for a long time. Then something shifted in his face. A small thing. A flicker. The corner of his mouth. He nodded once, slowly. "Adelaide said you would be stubborn." She was right. She usually was. He stood up. He pulled his jacket on. "I'll call Sterling. He needs to see that paper before close of business today. Then we're going to need to start moving. Health inspection. Soft opening. Word of mouth. You don't have time to do this slowly." He paused at the door. He looked back at her. "Welcome home." He left. Wren stood alone in the dining room. She looked at the paper in her hand. $18,000. 30 days. She folded the paper in half. She placed it on the counter beside the cash register in the same spot Adelaide had left her envelope. She walked into the kitchen and pulled the cast iron skillet down from the rack. The soft opening happened 9 days later. Wren had not slept more than 4 hours a night for any of those 9 days. She had cooked every recipe in the binder twice. She had passed the health inspection on the first visit. She had filed the paperwork for the business license with Sterling Whitmore's office. She had called the wholesale supplier and arranged a weekly delivery on credit using Adelaide's old account. Loretta had spread the word through the diner. Hollis had told 3 men at the hardware store, which in a town like Milbrook was the same as buying an advertisement in the newspaper. At 11 on a Saturday morning, Wren unlocked the front door and propped it open. The spring air came in cool and sweet, carrying the smell of cut grass from somewhere down the street. She stood in the doorway and looked out at Sycamore Street. The town was awake but unhurried. An older couple walked past on the sidewalk. The woman stopped. She grabbed her husband's arm. "Is this place opening again?" "Yes, ma'am." The woman's eyes filled. "Frank, Adelaide's table is opening. Get the truck. Go get Lucy and tell her to come right now." They were the first. By noon, 14 people sat at the tables and the counter. Some of them Wren had never seen. Others she recognized from the past week. Janelle from the egg farm. The man from the church who had repainted the sign. A retired schoolteacher Hollis had mentioned by name. Loretta sat at a corner table and watched the room with quiet satisfaction. Hollis stayed at the counter. He did not help serve. He did not offer suggestions. He sat on his stool and drank coffee and watched Wren move between the kitchen and the dining room, carrying plates of food to people who had come because they remembered Adelaide and wanted to see what her granddaughter could do. Wren served the soup first, then cornbread with butter and blackberry jam, then pot roast with carrots and potatoes. She cooked in batches, working the stove with a focus that shut out everything else. When a plate came back empty, she felt it in her chest, a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. An older man at the corner table ate his pot roast in silence. He set down his fork. He looked at his wife. He looked at the wall of photographs. He looked at his fork again. "That's June's pot roast," he said softly. "I would know it anywhere." His wife put her hand on his arm. They sat there together, remembering. Wren watched them from behind the pass-through window, and for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to feed someone. It was not about hunger. It was about saying, "I see you. You are not alone." The bell over the front door rang again. Wren looked up from the pass-through. A man stood in the doorway. He was thin, drawn. His face was lined in the way that men's faces line when they have spent too many years on too little sleep. His clothes were clean but cheap. His shoes were scuffed. He had a thin gray jacket draped over one arm. He looked older than Wren remembered. She had not seen him in 12 years, but she knew him, the way an animal knows a predator. It is only ever seen in a photograph. The conversation in the dining room continued around her. Forks clinked against plates. Loretta laughed at something Hollis said. The bell on the door rang one more time softly as the door eased shut behind the man. He walked to the counter. He sat down on the second stool from the right. He set his thin jacket carefully across his knees. He folded his hands on the counter in front of him. He looked at her through the pass-through window. His mouth opened. He closed it. He opened it again. His voice was rough, quieter than Wren had imagined it would be. "Wren." She did not move. "It's me. It's Dad." The dining room kept going. Someone asked Loretta for more sweet tea. The bell over the door did not ring. The clock on the wall ticked. Wren stood behind the pass-through window. She held a clean white plate in her hand. She did not put it down. That night, after the last customer left, after Loretta walked back across the street, after Hollis squeezed her shoulder once at the door and said nothing because there was nothing to say, Wren sat alone in the dark dining room. The lights were off. The chairs were back on the tables. The kitchen was clean. Her father was gone. He had left after 20 minutes without ordering anything. He had said almost nothing. He had told her where he was staying. The Pinecrest Motel on the south side of town. Room 12. He had said he wanted to talk. He had said he would come back tomorrow. He had said he hoped she would let him. She had not answered him. Now she sat at the counter in the dark. She pulled out her phone. The screen lit her face blue. She found the name in her contacts. The number she had only called once before. The number on the back of a napkin Sterling Whitmore had given her. Marin Calloway. She tapped the name. The phone rang. It rang 4 times. 5. Wren was about to hang up when a woman's voice answered. Cautious. Tired. "Hello, Aunt Marin." "It's Wren." A long breath on the other end. "Wren. He's here." Silence. "What, my father?" "He came to the restaurant today. He sat at the counter. He wants to talk." The silence stretched out. Wren could hear something in the background. A television. A man laughing on a sitcom. "Aunt Marin. I'm here. Why is he here?" Another silence. Longer. When Marin spoke again, her voice had dropped to something just above a whisper. It was the voice of a woman who had been afraid of a phone call for 12 years and was now living inside it. "Wren, listen to me. There is something else you need to know about your father. Something even Adelaide did not know." "What?" "I cannot say it on the phone." "What is it?" "I will drive down Saturday. I will tell you in person. Do not be alone with him before then. Do you understand me? Do not be alone with him." Wren did not answer. "Wren, promise me." The line went quiet. The television in the background went quiet. Somewhere on the other end of the country, A woman who had not seen her niece in 12 years sat in the dark and waited. "I promise," Wren said. The line clicked. Wren set the phone down on the counter. She looked across the dark dining room. The photographs on the walls were just shapes now, shadows of her mother's life. Adelaide's face in the framed photograph on the counter caught a thin slice of streetlight through the window. Wren looked at her grandmother's eyes. She did not know yet what Maren was going to tell her, but somewhere in the back of her chest, in the place where her mother's pendant rested against her skin, she could feel the shape of it already. A second weight settling beside the first. Heavier, older, worse. She turned off the light over the counter. She walked to the back room. She lay down on the cot in the dark and in the silence of a small restaurant in a small town, with her father 2 miles away in a motel room, and her aunt 200 miles north driving toward a confession she had carried for 12 years. Wren Calloway closed her eyes and waited for Saturday. Maren's car pulled up to the curb on Saturday morning just before 10. It was a modest sedan, dusty from a long highway drive, the kind of car that belonged to a woman who had been quietly losing for a long time. Wren watched through the front window as her aunt sat in the driver's seat without moving, hands at 10 and 2, eyes forward, the engine running. She sat that way for almost a full minute. Then she turned the engine off. She opened the door. She stepped out onto the sidewalk. Maren Calloway was smaller than Wren had expected. She was in her late 40s, but she carried herself like an older woman. Thin, hollow at the cheekbones, hair cut short and graying at the temples in a way that looked unintentional. She wore a plain blouse and slacks. She held a brown leather purse with both hands clutching it in front of her like a shield. She stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the green-painted sign. She did not move for another long moment. Wren opened the front door. They looked at each other across the small concrete step. Wren had thought she would feel rage. She had carried it for years. The anger about being given up. The anger about being forgotten. The anger about being lied to. She had expected the sight of this woman to unlock something violent and raw inside her. But what she felt was quieter. She felt tired. She felt like she was looking at someone who was already punishing herself more than Wren ever could. "You came early," Wren said. "I could not sleep." Maren's eyes moved from Wren's face to the restaurant behind her, then back, then to the photographs visible through the open door, then back to Wren. "You look like June. Everyone tells me that. Yes, they would." She paused. "Can I come in?" Wren stepped aside. Maren walked through the door slowly. Her eyes moved across the dining room. The photographs, the counter, the kitchen beyond the pass-through. She stopped in front of a framed photograph of June holding baby Wren in the yellow blanket. She stood there for a long time. Wren watched her aunt's shoulders rise once and fall the way shoulders move when a person is trying not to let a sound out. "She loved you," Maren said. "Your mother loved you more than anything in this world. I want you to know that. Whatever else I say today, I want you to know that first. Sit down." Maren sat at the counter. Wren did not. The counter between them was necessary, a barrier that allowed proximity without closeness. It was a structure Adelaide had built, and Wren now understood the purpose of every inch of it. "Tell me," Wren said. Maren set her purse on the counter. She folded her hands. She looked at them while she spoke. "When your father left you with me, I was a mess. My husband had walked out 3 months earlier. I was behind on rent. I was drinking too much. I told Roderick I could not take care of a child. He told me it would only be for a few weeks." She paused. "He left. He never came back. A year went by. Then, 2. I gave you to the state because I could not keep you, and I told myself I had no other choice. You did have a choice. You could have called Adelaide. Marin's hands tightened on each other. I know. You knew about the death certificate. I knew when. I found out a year after he filed it, through a phone call. He called me drunk one night and he told me what he had done. He told me he had told his mother-in-law that you were dead and that he had filed paperwork to make it official. He said it like it was a joke, like he was proud of it. Wren's breath came out slow. And you did not call her. Marin closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at Wren directly for the first time. I told myself it was too late, that the lie was already done, that undoing it would not help anybody. Adelaide thought you were dead. You were already in the system. I convinced myself that you were better off with the state than with me, or with a grandmother you did not know. Her voice broke. I was wrong. I knew I was wrong even then, but admitting it meant admitting what I had done. That I had given up my brother's daughter because I could not handle it. That I had heard the truth about Adelaide and I had buried it. I could not face that. She paused, and every year that went by made it harder. 5 years went by. 10 years went by. 12 years went by. I told myself Adelaide had probably moved on. I told myself she did not need to know. The longer I waited, the bigger the lie got. And the bigger it got, the more I could not pull myself out of it. Wren stood behind the counter. She did not speak for a long time. Why are you here now? Marin looked at her hands. Because I am dying. Wren went still. Marin did not look up. Liver, stage 4. They gave me 4 months 3 weeks ago. I have maybe 90 days left. I drove down here today because there is one more thing you need to know about your father. And I am the only one left alive who knows it. If I do not tell you, it dies with me. Wren did not move. She felt the restaurant go very small around her. The photographs on the wall watching. The smell of cornbread still faint in the air from yesterday. Tell me. Marin took a breath. When you were 10 years old, Adelaide almost found you. Wren's hands flattened against the counter. I know. No. You do not know. Marin reached into her purse. She pulled out an envelope. It was old, yellowed at the edges. She set it on the counter between them. Your grandmother hired an investigator named Mason Crawford. Mason worked her case for 14 years. He came close one time only. In the spring of 2018, he tracked down a girl in a Mecklenburg County group home whose age and birth date matched yours. He believed it was you. He told Adelaide he was close. The file was closed. The file was closed. Marin's voice flattened. By your father. Wren did not understand for a moment. Then she did. What? Marin opened the envelope. She removed a single piece of paper. A copy of a bank record. She slid it across the counter. Roderick Calloway was working construction in Atlanta when he heard through me that Adelaide had hired an investigator and was getting close. He drove to Charlotte. He found a county social services supervisor named Calvin Birch. He paid Calvin Birch $5,000 in cash to close your file and seal it. To make sure that no outside party could ever access your records without a court order. He paid him another $2,000 to transfer you to a different group home in a different part of the county, so that even if Mason came back, he would not find you in the same place. Wren read the bank record. The withdrawal was for $7,000. The date was 19 days before Adelaide's journal entry about the closed file. How do you have this? Roderick mailed it to me, with a note. He told me if anything ever happened to him, he wanted me to have proof. He wanted someone to know what he had done. He has always needed someone to know. Maren's voice grew quieter. He did not abandon you, Wren. He hunted you. He hunted Adelaide. Every time she got close, he found a way to push you further away, because he was afraid that if she found you, she would sue him for custody, and the custody fight would expose what he had done. The death certificate, the forgery. He could have gone to prison. Wren held the paper in her hand. The numbers on the page swam. For 12 years, she had believed her father was a man who could not handle the weight of a child. A weak man. A coward. A drunk who had walked away because walking away was easier than staying. The truth was worse. The truth was that he had not walked away at all. He had stood behind her just out of sight for 14 years, pushing her into deeper and deeper rooms whenever the door of one of them threatened to open. Adelaide had not run out of time. Adelaide had been beaten by her own son-in-law, the man who had killed her daughter on paper, and then spent a decade making sure she never found the granddaughter she knew was alive. Wren set the paper down. She placed her palm over it. She pressed it flat against the counter. And now he is here. Now he is here. He wants the restaurant. He wants whatever Adelaide left. He always has. He just had to wait until she was dead. Wren did not speak. She looked across the dining room. The photographs of her mother. The empty wall with the small handwritten note. The third stool from the left where Hollis sat every morning. Then she looked at Maren. I want him here. Wren, at 3 o'clock today. I want him at this counter. I want Sterling here. I want Hollis here. I want you here. And I want this in front of him. She slid the bank record back across the counter. You drove all this way to give me a chance to do this right. I am going to do it right. Maren picked up the paper. She nodded once. She did not speak. She did not need to. After 12 years of silence, she had said what she came to say. The rest was Wren's. At 3 o'clock, the front door opened. Roderick Calloway stepped inside. He was wearing the same thin gray jacket he had worn the day before. His shoes were scuffed in the same places. He carried himself the way Wren had seen him in her childhood. A small slope to the shoulders that suggested decades of bracing for impact. He had spent his whole life being the kind of man other men forgot to look at. She had spent her whole life being afraid of him without knowing why. She knew why now. He saw Maren at the counter and stopped. Maren. His voice was thin. Maren did not turn around. Roderick's eyes moved across the dining room. He saw Sterling Whitmore in the corner booth, a manila folder open in front of him. He saw Hollis Crane standing behind the counter, arms crossed, that worn face unmoving. He saw the photographs on the walls. He saw the empty stretch of wall with the handwritten note. He saw Wren standing behind the counter. The blood went out of his face. What is this? Sit down, Wren said. He hesitated. He looked at the door behind him. For half a second, Wren saw the calculation pass across his face. The instinct to run. He had been running for 25 years. He had built his whole life around being the man who walked out before the consequences walked in. Then he sat. He chose the second stool from the right, the same stool he had chosen yesterday. He folded his hands on the counter the same way. He had a small routine. It was the only thing about him that was not lying. Wren stepped behind the counter to a position directly across from him. The pass-through window framed her shoulders. Behind her hung a photograph of June in this kitchen, stirring something in a massive pot, looking back at the camera with a grin. June was a witness now, too. They all were. Wren placed one piece of paper on the counter between them. The bank record. The withdrawal. Calvin Birch. $7,000. Roderick's eyes dropped to it. He did not pick it up. His hands went still on the counter. His jaw moved once. He swallowed. Where did you get this? Marin. She has had it for 10 years. You sent it to her. That was a private letter. There is nothing private left between us. Wren placed a second piece of paper on the counter beside the first. The death certificate. The photocopy from Adelaide's file. The forged one. Roderick's eyes dropped to it. He stared at it for a long moment. Then he closed his eyes. Wren, look at me. He looked at her. His eyes were watery. His mouth was loose. I want you to say it, she said. I want you to say it out loud. In this room, in front of these people, I want you to say what you did. I did not. Do not lie. Not here. Not under her photographs. Not at her counter. He looked at the photograph behind her. At June. At his wife. At the woman he had been married to for 6 years and whose memory he had spent 20 more years burying. His shoulders broke first. The shoulders always go before the face. I filed the death certificate. His voice cracked. I called Adelaide and I told her you were dead. I did it 3 days after the accident. I did it because I did not want her to take you from me. I did not have money. I did not have a job. I had a 4-year-old child I did not know how to raise. And Adelaide had everything. The house, the savings June had left, the life insurance. The will named you as the beneficiary. Everything was yours. And I was the only thing standing between Adelaide and her granddaughter. He paused. He did not look up. So I made it so I was not standing there anymore. I made it so there was no granddaughter. I made it so the money came to me as the surviving spouse, as the legal guardian. I took it all and I left. I left you with Marin because I knew Marin would not ask any questions. And I disappeared. And then I was 10 years old. He nodded once. And then you were 10 years old. And Adelaide hired the investigator. And he got close. Say it. I paid Calvin Birch $7,000 to close your file and to move you to a different group home. I made sure Adelaide could never find you. Because if she found you, she would sue for custody. And the custody fight would expose the death certificate. And I would go to prison. He paused. I did it 3 more times. Wren went still. What? Roderick looked up. His face was wet. 3 more times. Over the next 8 years. Every time Adelaide got close, every time Mason picked up the trail, I had a contact at the agency. Calvin Birch had a contact at the agency. They told me whenever Adelaide filed a new request, whenever she made a new inquiry, whenever Mason got pulled into a new county, and every time I paid to have your file moved, to have records resealed, to have leads buried. Adelaide was a woman with $12,000 in cash and a private investigator. I was a man with a county clerk on payroll. I beat her 4 times. She just did not know it. The dining room was silent. Hollis had not moved. His arms were still crossed. His jaw was a stone. Marin had not turned around. She had bent her head forward. Her shoulders were shaking soundless. Sterling Whitmore sat in the corner booth writing on a yellow legal pad. He did not look up. Wren placed her hands flat on the counter. The wood was cold under her palms. Adelaide died believing she had failed, she said. Roderick did not speak. She died believing she had run out of time. She died believing she had not been smart enough, or fast enough, or rich enough to find me. She died believing that. And the whole time she had been beaten. Not by time. By you. Wren, I have one question for you. And then I am done. He waited. Why did you come here? He looked at the counter. The will. Sterling wrote me after Adelaide died. He found me through Marin. He told me she had left the property to her granddaughter, contingent on the granddaughter being located. He told me if the granddaughter was never found within 5 years, the property and the funds would revert to her next of kin. I am her next of kin, by blood, as your father. I waited. You waited for me to die in the system. I waited for the 5 years to pass. And then I showed up. And then you showed up. She nodded once. Sterling. Sterling stood. He walked to the counter. He set a single sheet of paper down in front of Roderick. It was a voluntary termination of parental rights. Sterling had drafted it overnight. Wren placed a pen on the paper. Sign this, she said, and walk out that door. Never come back. Never call. Never write. You forfeit any inheritance claim. You forfeit any contact. You are not my father. You are a man who was married to my mother for 6 years and who did everything he could to make sure I never found out who I was. Sign it. Wren, listen. Sign it. I am still your father. No, she said. Adelaide was my family. June was my family. Hollis is my family. Loretta is my family. Marin is my family. You are a stranger who happens to share my last name. Sign it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up the pen. His hand shook. He wrote his name slowly. The pen scratched against the paper. He set the pen down. He stood up. He looked at her one last time. His mouth opened. Wren shook her head. No, she said. You do not get to say anything to me. Not now. Not ever. He nodded once. He walked to the door. He opened it. He paused on the threshold and did not turn around. Then he stepped through it and the bell rang once and the door eased shut behind him. Wren stood at the counter. She did not cry. She did not shake. She picked up the signed paper. She slid it across to Sterling. He nodded. He placed it in his folder. He closed the folder. Hollis uncrossed his arms. Done, he said. Done. Marin lifted her head. Her face was streaked. Her hands trembled on the counter. Wren walked around the counter. She stood in front of her aunt. She did not speak for a long moment. Then she reached out and placed her hand over Marin's. You came, she said. Marin nodded. Thank you. Marin made a sound that was not a word. She put her free hand over her mouth. Wren let her aunt cry. It was the first time in 12 years that Marin had been allowed to. There were still 12 days left on the tax lien. That night after Marin left for a motel and Sterling drove back to his office, Wren sat at the desk in the back office and pulled Adelaide's journal toward her. She did not open it to read. She opened it to search. Somewhere in those 14 years of entries, Adelaide had mentioned every important thing she had done for the restaurant. Every recipe she had perfected. Every supplier she had argued with. Every customer she had remembered by name. If there was a way out of the tax lien, Adelaide had left a trail to it. Wren turned the pages slowly. It took her 2 hours. She found it on a page dated 4 years earlier, just before Adelaide had been diagnosed. Mailed the historic registry application today. Building inspector came out last week. Said the original brickwork is from 1923. The tin ceiling is original. The bar back was milled in Asheville before the war. He filed the recommendation with the state. They say 6 to 8 months for approval. If it goes through, the building gets historic designation. Tax benefits for restoration. Property tax abatement available for owner-operators. Hollis says it is a long shot. I told him I'm tired of short shots. Wren turned the page. A month later. Approved. Registered the building today. Adelaide's table is officially on the North Carolina Register of Historic Places. The tax abatement application is on my desk. I will file it after the inspection in May. Wren turned to the next page. It was blank. 3 pages later, the journal resumed. The diagnosis, the treatment, the decline. Adelaide had been approved, but she had never filed the abatement. She had run out of time. Wren sat back in the chair. The lamp hummed. She opened the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet. She found the historic registry certificate. Adelaide had framed it. She had kept it in the drawer because she had never finished the rest of the paperwork to display it. The abatement application was clipped to the back of the certificate. Blank. Half filled out. The pen had stopped mid-sentence. Wren placed her hand over the blank fields. Then she picked up her phone and called Sterling. He answered on the second ring. Wren. Sterling. I need you to come back to the restaurant tomorrow morning. I need to file something with the county before close of business Monday. And I need you to help me organize the rest of the week. What did you find? She told him. He was silent for a long moment. Wren. Property tax abatement for a registered historic building can wipe out the back taxes entirely. Up to 100%. It depends on the county's review. But Milbrook County has approved this exemption for every historic building that has applied in the last 10 years. How long does it take? If we file Monday morning with a complete application, we can have a preliminary decision in 7 days. The lien clock pauses the moment we file. Royce's 30-day window stops dead. Wren closed her eyes. Sterling. I will be there at 7 in the morning. She set the phone down. She placed her hand on the framed certificate. She did not speak. She did not need to. Wren filed the abatement application Monday morning at 9:15. She filed it at the county courthouse in the assessor's office with Sterling beside her, holding a folder of supporting documents Adelaide had prepared 4 years earlier. The clerk stamped the application. She handed Wren a receipt. You'll hear back within 7 business days, the clerk said. The lien proceeding is suspended pending review. Sterling and Wren walked out into the sunlight. The town was already moving. Pickup trucks on Main Street. A woman watering a planter outside the post office. A boy on a bicycle weaving between parked cars. Wren stopped on the courthouse steps. Sterling, she said, I want to do something else this week. He looked at her. I want to throw a dinner. A real one. Friday night. Reservations only. $50 a seat. 3 courses. I want to feed this town the way Adelaide used to feed it. And I want every dollar from that dinner to go to making sure Cornerstone never gets near this building again. Sterling thought about it for a moment. You will need 80 paying seats to clear the legal fees plus a buffer. Can you cook for 80? Hollis will help me. So will Loretta. So will Marin. And there are 3 other people in this town who already have apron strings tied to that kitchen. Then do it. She did. Friday night, the restaurant was full. 83 seats, 3 turns, 249 plates, served over 4 hours. Every chair filled, every dish from the binder. People stood outside the front window watching. People drove from 2 counties away. The man from the church who had repainted the sign brought his entire family. Janelle Marsh brought every neighbor on her road. Loretta closed her diner for the first time in 19 years and put a sign in the window that read, "Eating across the street tonight." Hollis worked the counter. Marin washed dishes in the back. Sterling, in shirt sleeves with his tie loosened, took payments at the door because nobody else was available, and someone had to. He looked uncomfortable. He did it anyway. Wren worked the kitchen. She did not stop moving for 4 hours. She did not look at the door. She did not think about Roderick. She did not think about Cornerstone. She did not think about the tax lien or the abatement or Dalton Royce or the death certificate. She cooked. She cooked the way her mother had cooked, by feel, by instinct, by the small adjustments her hands knew without asking permission from her mind. She tasted everything once and trusted herself the second time. Halfway through the second turn, Dalton Royce walked through the front door. He was wearing the same slate gray suit. He stood just inside the doorway and looked around at the packed dining room, at the people standing along the walls waiting for their seats, at the line forming on the sidewalk outside, at the photographs of June that no one had time to look at tonight because the restaurant was too alive. He looked at the pass-through window. Wren was bent over a pot of pot roast ladling sauce. She did not see him. Hollis saw him. Hollis walked over slowly. He stood beside Dalton Royce. He did not speak for a long moment. He was a foot taller than Royce and 3 times as still. Then he said, without looking at the man, in a voice low enough that only Royce could hear it, "Your lien is suspended. The historic abatement was filed Monday. The preliminary decision came back yesterday. The county is waiving the back taxes in full as restoration credit. You have lost." Royce did not move. Hollis turned his head a 1/4 inch. "And son, I would walk out of this restaurant before any of these people figure out who you are." Royce looked at Hollis. He looked at the room. He looked at the long line of people on the sidewalk. He turned. He opened the door. He stepped out into the night. The bell rang once. Hollis went back to the counter. Wren did not learn until the next morning that he had come and gone. When she heard, she did not say anything. She simply went into the office and removed the framed historic registry certificate from the drawer and hung it on the wall above the cash register, where Adelaide had always meant for it to go. The dinner cleared $21,000. Wren put it in the account Adelaide had left her. She paid Sterling's fees. She paid for the new health inspection. She put the rest aside for the next slow month. The restaurant opened for regular service the following Tuesday. 3 months later, Adelaide's table was open 5 days a week. Wren cooked lunch and dinner Tuesdays through Saturdays. The menu was small. 8 items from June's recipes, all translated through Adelaide's careful hand. The black-eyed pea soup was the most popular. The cornbread was the most talked about. The peach cobbler, which Wren had finally perfected on her 6th attempt, was the dish people drove from other towns to eat. She lived in the small room behind the office. She had bought a real bed to replace the cot, a dresser from a thrift shop, a lamp for the nightstand. The garbage bag was gone. Her clothes hung in a narrow closet Hollis had built from scrap lumber on a Tuesday afternoon without being asked. Hollis came every morning at 7:30 for coffee. 3rd stool from the left. He read the newspaper. He did not talk unless he had something to say. Some mornings they sat in silence for an hour. Those were good mornings, too. Loretta sent customers across the street when her diner was full. She never asked for anything in return. Maren came down from Raleigh on Saturdays for as long as she was able. They did not talk about the past. They talked about the weather and the customers and what was in the soup that day. Sometimes Maren told Wren a story about June. Small details. The way June used to hum hymns off-key. The way she put hot sauce on cereal, which Adelaide thought was an abomination. The way she laughed with her whole chest. In late August, Maren stopped being able to drive down. In October, she passed away in a hospice room in Raleigh. Wren was there. She held her aunt's hand for the last 6 hours. She did not say anything. She did not need to. Maren had already said what she came to say. On a Tuesday evening in November, after the last customer had left and the kitchen was clean, Wren sat down at the desk in the office. The framed historic registry certificate hung on the wall above the register out in the dining room. The death certificate had been burned in the back alley on a Sunday in June. Roderick had vanished again. Sterling had heard he was in Florida. Nobody was looking for him. Wren pulled a piece of paper from the printer. She picked up a pen. She wrote, "Dear Grandma, my name is Wren. I am your granddaughter. I'm sorry it took me so long to get here." The door was open. Just like you said it would be. The recipes are in the binder. The photographs are on the wall. Hollis is at the counter every morning. The town remembers you. I remember you too, even though we never met. I remember you because you left yourself in every corner of this place, in every recipe, in every photograph, in every letter you wrote trying to find me. You looked for me for 14 years. I am here now. I came home. I'm keeping the door open. She folded the letter and placed it in the filing cabinet in the drawer with Adelaide's journal and the 14 years of investigator reports and the unanswered letters from the state. One more piece of paper in a drawer full of them. But this one was different. This one was an answer. She turned off the lamp. The bell over the front door rang. It was after hours. Wren was not expecting anyone. She walked out of the office and through the kitchen and into the dining room. A teenage girl was standing just inside the door. She was maybe 16. Thin, hair pulled back into a messy knot, wearing a denim jacket too light for the November cold. She had a small backpack over one shoulder. The strap was held together with a safety pin. Her eyes moved across the dining room with the wide, careful attention of someone assessing whether a place was safe. Wren recognized the look immediately. She had worn it every time she walked into a new foster home. For 14 years, the girl did not sit down. She stood near the door, her hands shoved in her jacket pockets. "We're closed," Wren said gently. "But are you hungry?" The girl nodded once, a small, careful nod. "What's your name?" "Piper." "Sit wherever you want." "Piper." Piper looked at the counter. She chose the stool closest to the door, the one that would let her run if she needed to. Wren went into the kitchen. She brought back a bowl of black-eyed pea soup, a thick square of cornbread, a glass of sweet tea. She set the food down in front of the girl. She did not hover. She did not ask questions. She had been that girl enough times to know that what you needed first was food, and what you needed second was to be left alone to eat it. Piper ate, slowly at first, then faster. When the bowl was empty, Wren refilled it without being asked. When Piper had finished the second bowl and wiped her mouth on her sleeve, Wren sat down on the stool beside her. "Where are you staying?" "My cousin's. In Ashboro." She's not home much. She know where you are tonight." Piper looked at her hands. "No." Wren nodded. "I'm going to need help around here," she said. "Washing dishes, sweeping floors. Can't pay much yet, but you get fed. And there's a room in the back if you need one for a night or two." Piper looked up. Her eyes widened. "You serious?" "I'm serious." Piper did not answer for a long moment. Then she nodded once, the same small, careful nod she had used to say her name. "I can wash dishes." "Good." Wren stood up. She picked up the empty bowl. She walked it back to the kitchen. When she came back, Piper was looking at the wall. She was looking at the empty stretch of wall, the space where Adelaide had pinned the note. "This wall is for Wren's pictures when she comes home." The note was gone now. In its place hung a single photograph in a simple wooden frame. A photograph Hollis had taken with Loretta's camera on the day of the soft opening. Wren stood behind the counter in the photograph. There was flour on her hands and a dish towel over her shoulder, and she was looking at someone off camera and laughing. It was the first photograph anyone had ever taken of her laughing. Beside it, on a small brass hook, Hollis had drilled into the wall the week before, hung a second frame photograph. Adelaide. The silver-haired woman in the doorway with her arms thrown open wide. Waiting. Hollis had taken Adelaide's photograph down from the counter and given it a place on the wall. The two women looked at each other across a small distance of plaster. Piper looked at them. "Who's that?" she asked. Wren looked at the wall, too. "That's my grandmother. She built this place. She kept it open for me for 18 years, even when she could not see me, even when nobody believed I was alive. She kept the door open." Piper was quiet for a moment. "And the other one," Wren almost smiled. "That's me. The day I came home." Piper nodded slowly. She looked at the photograph of Adelaide for a long time. Then she looked at the photograph of Wren. Then she looked at the empty stretch of wall just beside it. There was still room. The wall was not full yet. There were spaces left for more photographs, more people. More days like this one. More girls in denim jackets too thin for November. More old men at the counter. More women bringing eggs on Tuesdays. More dinners that ran 3 turns. More peach cobblers that took 6 attempts to get right. The door was open. It would stay open. Wren walked Piper to the back room. She showed her where the cot was, where the bathroom was, where the light switch was. She told her she would see her in the morning. She told her there was a clean towel on the dresser. She told her if she needed anything in the night, the office light would be on for 1 more hour. She left the girl in the doorway with the lamp on. She walked back through the kitchen and through the dining room. She stood for a moment in the center of the restaurant. The chairs were back on the tables. The cornbread smell still lived in the walls. She walked to the empty wall. She placed her palm flat against the plaster, the way she had done on the first day. The wall pressed back. Cool. Patient. "Hi, Grandma," she said quietly. The restaurant did not answer. It did not have to. Outside on Sycamore Street, the streetlights were on. A pickup truck drove past slowly. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once and went quiet. The night smelled like wood smoke and the last of autumn. Wren turned off the lights in the dining room. She locked the front door from the inside. The same lock, the same brass key, the same door. She checked the stove. She checked the cooler. She wiped down the counter one last time. Then she walked back through the kitchen and past the office where the light was still on for the girl in the back room. She lay down on her bed. The restaurant settled around her. The creak of old wood, the hum of the cooler, the faint smell of cornbread that never quite left the walls. The brass key on the nightstand, the jade pendant beside it. Two small objects from two women who had loved her before she knew she was loved. In the morning, she would wake up early. She would start the coffee. She would heat the skillet. She would mix the batter. She would unlock the front door. Hollis would come at 7:30. Piper would come out of the back room rubbing her eyes. The town would come after that. One by one, the tables would fill with people who came because the food was good and the door was open. And the woman behind the counter understood finally what her grandmother had spent 18 years trying to teach her. That home is not where they keep you. Home is where someone kept a place for you. And the door once opened would never close again.